All right, welcome to Sound Sagas episode 2. This is our first deep dive episode. Will and I have each selected a band that represents a space or a type of music that we are very tied to. And we have personal experience with these bands that we want to share as well. But, we've each picked something that's important to us, and we're open to share them with you. And we're going to kind of do a two-parter here. Will's going to go first with the band that he's selected, talk in depth, and then we'll follow up with my selection. We'll kind of do some talk about compare and contrast. Yeah, we'll see how it turns out.
Yeah.
Obviously, very different tastes here, but that's kind of the beauty of it. You get something from two very different areas of music. So who did you end up selecting for today?
Well, I picked Rilo Kiley, a pretty impactful band for me.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely want to hear from you all in the comments about bands that have been impactful for you might want to hear about. So don't forget to do that. But yeah, I kind of started with them a long time ago, middle school, high school. One of my friends turned me on to them, I think right after the Execution of All Things era. Check my notes real fast.
Yeah, what year was, kind of put some time on there. What year was that around?
That was around 2020 or 2002.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, that was the one previous. So I got started with that one and then went into more adventurous, which was 2004.
Mm.
And that one I really hooked on to.
Okay. And this was back at that time, right?
Right. It was released in 2004.
Yeah, and you were experiencing these as they came out.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's always the best, yeah.
The show that, was most impactful for me that I saw them was on the more adventurous tour.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was just super cool. Like, I talked about it with people in the industry and as like an entry to like some internship jobs. I wrote the story down, but it was basically this super cool venue in Tallahassee, where I'm from in Florida, at the Moon at the time is what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be this really cool black dancing club, like way back when.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kind of refurbed it once it fell out of use and became a music venue. The visceral memories I get from it are like in that venue when it was still smoking indoors too at that time,
yeah.
which is worth mentioning.
Yeah.
Thank God that went away.
Yeah, agree.
But yeah, if you smoked in there, it would rise to the ceiling and kind of make this cloud in the middle. And then there were wraparounds for like the balcony and the bars.
Gotcha.
So it was I remember looking through the smoke at the stage and seeing a very cool, like picaresque kind of montage of the band playing.
It sounds like there was some atmosphere to this whole experience.
Very atmospheric.
Almost like it was meant to be a little bit.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It was very fortuitous.
Yeah.
The interesting thing too was the opening band was a pirate band doing sea shanties before that was popular.
Like serious pirate band or joke pirate band?
They were pretty serious.
Okay, yeah. Stage props and everything and like.
It was, yeah. I think there was some humor to it.
Okay.
They were very clearly supposed to be pirates singing about pirate stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah. I don't know where they found them or like how they got on that tour, but it was super fun.
Yeah.
And then, going into the band a little bit, the version I saw was Jenny Lewis, Blake Sennett, Pierre DeReader, and Jason Bozel.
Mm-hmm.
Previous drummer was Dave Rock, who was on the recordings in all the other iterations of the band.
Mm-hmm.
All consummate musicians, really good at their craft. It was really like kind of they all started really young and kind of played through their teen years doing tours and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all really like great musicians, great storytellers. Jenny Lewis and Blake Sennett would switch off singing songs. Like Blake Sennett had a really great song on More Adventurous called Ripcord, where he did kind of his style. And then Jenny has some great ones on there as well. She is the main singer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they've all kind of gone on to do interesting things in music since the band too, which I always thought was really cool. Like
some artists don't.
Yeah, some call it quits and then that era is over. That time is done.
Sounds like Rilo Kiley was an expression of them then and when, right?
Very much so.
Yep.
And the reason they cite for breaking up is they were just all so tired. Like
that's totally the fairest.
Yeah.
You couldn't get fairer than that, honestly. Yeah.
Like they burned bright and burned out.
Yep.
but they all kind of continued their other stuff. Like
Mhm.
Jenny has a very successful solo career. I'm seeing her on Friday actually this week. Jason has, I believe he's drummed in other bands. I actually am less up on him. Blake Sennett went on to form The Elected with another great guitarist. Peer to Reader has a record label, little record company, and he actually has put out a bunch of stuff for them. Their first EP, which is really their first record, Initial Friend, which is right there, was put out as a re-release on the Reader's label, little record company.
Gotcha.
It originally was like a series of a few pressings of CDs. I'm not sure if they actually did vinyl back then, but I know they did CDs. And the way Pitchfork tells it is Dave Foley of Kids in the Hall of Fame helped finance part of that.
Okay.
Because he saw them in LA. They were all an LA band. And he was like blown away and was like, I need to like get this to more people. And so that's from what I read on Pitchfork would happen, how they got that off the ground. And then years later, it still has a following. I mean, there's some songs on there that were in TV shows and movies. And they had a very good like kind of relationship in Hollywood with other media. I think that's part of what burned them out too. Like Jenny was a child actor, Blake was a child actor.
Kind of doing the full gamut of like expression with the band, not just writing music, but being part of other pieces of art.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It felt more of a catharsis thing for them too, which kind of gives the vibe that comes across with it, which is so interesting too. It's kind of like a reflective, deeper indie rock vehicle than a lot of stuff was at the time.
Gotcha. And I feel this when I hear it too. What specifically about Rilo Kiley, whether in the early era of their music or later, like drew you to that music? Like, why do you like this band so much? Like,
so I also was a fan of like the Midwest kind of stuff that was happening then and before then with Saddle Creek.
Okay.
A lot of my favorite bands are from there. Bright Eyes, The Faint, Nina Dabana. So, and they kind of got folded into that mix. Jenny put out like a split single. They released one of the records. So there was a relationship there that I knew about. And then just how honest and expressive it was. There's not a lot of music that sounds just like it. There's a lot of music that is kind of inspired by.
Okay.
Like Bethany Cosentino from Best Coast has cited Rilo Kiley as like a huge a huge influence on her music and her band. And I know there's a lot of other bands out there like that. You can kind of hear it in like Waxahachie and like Kitty Crutchfield and that sort of music as well. But yeah, it just feels so like...
Is there like an authenticity to it almost?
So authentic,
yeah.
And you can still hear that in songs like Better Son and Daughter.
Gotcha.
A lot of them just will not age. They kind of sing about stuff that everyone talks about, feels about.
A timelessness that I think all great music has to have.
Totally.
Not that all great music that is timeless. I'm sorry, not that all music is timeless, has to be great, but I think all great music has to have some timeless element to it, right?
Yeah, it definitely has that element of like timelessness to it. There's also, since they were all, I don't know how they were so good so young, but since they're so good at what they were doing, it really sounds like it could come from different ages. Like The Frug, which is a song on Initial Friend, is a mock of like those old songs that were about like dances.
So it's almost like they were young, but they had the wisdom almost of older age, maybe.
It seems like it, but they clearly didn't.
Maybe that's the magic of it, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a magic.
That's a good description of how maybe it sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like timeless and familiar, but still new and like young, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard thing to recapture or capture in the first place.
Yes.
I know they probably don't want to go back to anything like that. I mean, I know for certain Jenny Lewis doesn't. Blake Sennett kind of did with The Elected, but I don't think he does anything like that anymore.
So the later projects of the artists involved in the band are not
really reflective.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I don't think it.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of artists have like a huge variation in how they can express themselves musically. And I think it's interesting when artists go from one style to another.
Right.
Right. And you see a lot of this in a lot of music, right? Like artists jumping different spots. Totally. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jenny's solo records, there's a lot to talk about there. That's another episode though.
Yeah.
But they all kind of change pretty drastically. Like I remember listening to The Voyager when it came out with you.
First time I heard that with you was fantastic.
Yeah, it's just like
Awesome
great
album.
moody music.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the mood is. I mean, it's kind of sad, but it's not. Her latest is kind of almost an antithesis to that, where
Gotcha.
like Voyager was very like introspective and sad, kind of, but not wordy. And this new one, Joyal, is kind of rehashing what it means to be happy and like truly joyous.
Is there an introvert extrovert element to why you appreciate this band? Are they both inward and outward?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think there could be.
Yeah.
But it is very like music for introverts, I think. Her solo stuff is not as much.
Okay.
But I definitely feel that way about Rilo Kiley.
Gotcha.
Although More Adventurous is the most, and Blacklight are probably the most extroverted sounding records.
But they're not by any measure like extroverted sort of like.
They can be. I mean, Blacklight has a couple songs that are very
So maybe there is a dynamic
punchy.
there of like, I think bands in especially the indie space that can like be expressive, but also and like be vocal about, I guess, whatever they're singing about or the style of music can be very like I guess outward feeling, but have like very deep inward messages where you have to sit and focus by yourself to really dig into the album.
I definitely think there's an element of that in there.
Nice, yeah.
And for More Adventurous, the most popular song in their Portions for Foxes, it has that same kind of dichotomy of like it's kind of a serious song, but it's done in this very like poppy, fun way.
Yeah.
And that's true of a lot of their music. So it's a little bit of both. It's a good mixture.
Do you think Rilo Kiley is, you wouldn't call it sad music?
Some of it I would.
Yeah.
It's not like Elliott Smith though.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even Elliott Smith joked about how he's not trying to make sad songs. That's the songs he's making. And Phoebe Bridgers has had that problem too, where like she makes sad girl music, but it's not, that's just the music that she wants to make.
Gotcha.
I don't think a lot of her songs are about personal experiences. I mean, I'm sure some of them are, but it's interesting that way where like you can tell when some people are putting on an artifice, but if you can't tell, that kind of frustrates people more. And then they just assume it's not.
Yeah. That's a good point, actually. Like that, this comes back to the authenticity, and it's hard for bands to like. You can't just sit there and think like, let's be authentic, right? It's a matter of practice and how you do and how you perform.
And if you do sit there and think that, it's very obvious that
it is almost obvious that you're trying hard. You see this a lot in heavy metal. We'll get into this in the next segment, but like tryhardism, like being as like as possible. Goes so far, but goes very little sometimes.
No, I agree.
This band sounds effortless almost. Rilo Kiley.
But I also don't like that word.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
It takes a lot of effort to do that.
Okay, yeah. I was meaning more of like when you consume the final album, when you hear the music played out, it almost feels like they were made to do it.
It does feel effortless.
Effortless, yeah. But by no measure is any good music effortless.
No, I'm sure they broke their brains trying to do a lot of it.
Well, they're very good musicians as well. Like that's part of it.
Right. Yeah.
And their technicality doesn't get in the way of.
No, and it's funny too because I mean I think between Ginny and Blake they were kind of the leads, with Ginny being the clear lead, but they kind of fought being the leader a little bit, and the other Pierre DeReader and Jason Boesel or Dave Rock, it never comes through that they were trying to like be the star.
Gotcha.
Which I think helped the band a ton because they were just like a solid backbone.
It's like band dynamic. Yeah.
Right. There are even some songs on Archives, the like last record that they put out, which is just a collection of songs. Which anyone getting into them, I would actually recommend that.
Really?
Even though it's like the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
It's a really good retrospective of like everything.
Okay, so it gives you like a full picture almost.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're a music fan particularly, it gives you some insights. They dug through a lot of old stuff, like all those photos on the cover, fan photos that were submitted, I believe.
Okay.
They made a video for the song Let Me Back In, which is about LA and like has a bunch of fan submitted stuff.
Cool.
But all that to say, DeReader and Dave Rock and Boesel all knew like kind of where they were going. But there's a song on that record that they cut, probably from the More Adventurous era, where DeReader was actually singing and had a more front center role. which I'm sure they all kind of played around with each other playing the front lead
Right.
for a while.
And tested the waters almost.
Yeah, but they just
Yeah.
decided, this one doesn't really fit in the
Yeah.
other ones. And I don't know, it's good to see that stuff was made, even though
Yeah.
those weren't the choices.
Even the concept of that album of being like a retrospective or a whole picture, but made up of cutting room floor.
Yeah,
It's the concept that we are still the parts we don't put into the music, right?
totally.
Yeah.
And just how much is
exactly.
there.
Exactly. How maybe prolific they were in writing and practicing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like bands that have the obvious effort put into it, right? And you said fan submitted, so they like paid attention to their fans too, right?
That's that's another thing that helps them a lot is
Yeah.
they have some pretty devoted fans.
Great.
Like with that package, they also released a cassette that has their demos on it,
Mm-hmm.
which is very listenable. Like I love that cassette. And I mean, I actually wanted to mention too, I'll put the Let Me Back In video in the description for people who want to watch it. But the reader, I mean, he also has all this other stuff that he's doing on the side where like Tim Heidecker makes music, the guy from Tim and Eric.
Yeah.
And he's actually a great artist and puts out all his records. So I think I was trying to look up when he started Little Record Company as imprint,
Mm-hmm.
but I think he was doing that for a lot of their history. So he was probably archiving all this stuff to like kind of save for later, which is another like thing that takes another kind of level of insight.
It does, yeah. It's almost there's almost like the art element to like releasing and compartmentalizing your artistic effort into albums and different releases that sort of give people the picture of what you're trying to do. To just release your music willy-nilly. It's some demos that you get like are pretty rough, right? Like
Right.
in the world out there in the demo collecting area.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I worked
Yeah.
at the label, like we literally had a mail bin
Yep.
full of demos, and we did make time for
Yeah.
anyone out there who submits demos to listen to all of them. Like it was an intern's job to go through,
Mhm.
put them all in, and then if a certain amount of people voted it down, it
Right.
went in the bin. But if a certain amount of people said yes, it went up the flagpole.
Yeah.
Like they found some artists that way.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was kind of funny though. Like CDs, we didn't pay as much attention to. Vinyl, we've always paid more attention to. Cassettes, we paid more attention to. It totally depends on the label, but
Hot tip right there.
yeah, but it's worth submitting stuff like that to PO boxes still.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that actually reminds me too, like that would be if I produced a demo for potential record deal,
Mm-hmm.
that'd be like a dream come true to make a demo that's like someone plays it and they're like, oh shit.
Right. Right.
But Weezer has a story like that where
Oh, really? Yeah.
I forget who the producer was, but Matt Sharp, the original bassist for Weezer, gave him a tape because he was like doing some job for him, like unrelated to music. And he like sat on it for a couple weeks, but then still had it. Was like, oh, he was a nice guy. I'll listen to it. And it like blew him away and he called him instantly. I was like, oh man, what I think it was Sweater Song. He said that about.
Even if the band whoever band you're talking about, even if they don't like have that element of like immediately getting blown people away, right? Like a wonder story like that, the band can still harness that energy of like, you can feel that they're reaching a point where they're going to try to blow you away, right?
Oh, totally.
I feel like Rilo Kiley for you and like as a band that you really, really like has probably blown you away on a couple of occasions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be curious to see if I just blind gave that cassette to some people what they thought, because the cassette of their demos kind of blows me away. Like if I don't
Really?
think about the
Nice.
context. Yeah.
Nice. And like, I guess you mentioned the time where you saw them in Florida in the early 2000s.
Yeah, on the Moon.
Any other experiences since then?
That was the only time I caught them as a group.
Okay.
I've seen Jenny Lewis a lot more since then.
Gotcha.
I wish I'd caught Blake Sennett when he was in the Elective.
Mhm.
They were a Sub Pop band, so there's a couple records on Sub Pop,
Mm.
and they have some great songs. It does come off kind of similar to some of his Rilo Kiley stuff. So
Mhm.
like I said, that was probably the most reflective. And I think I'm probably misremembering this, but I think his guitarist has toured with Jenny before too. Like everyone in LA kind of helps each other out.
Yeah.
Like it's a scene, like
Makes sense.
at least for this kind of music.
Hmm.
But yeah, just Jenny Lewis a lot since then. Maybe a reunion show, very unlikely.
Yeah. Never want to count on it, but you never know these days.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
and
I have
if they did, would it be good? You never know.
I've heard no inklings. I
Yeah.
think it would be. I think they could get back
Yeah.
to a pretty good game.
Okay.
And Jenny Lewis has never left the game, so
Gotcha.
yeah, it'd be be interesting.
Yeah, it's funny for me to engage with this style of music because I love the singer-songwriter aspect of it,
Mm-hmm.
like especially with Jenny Lewis. The A lot of indie rock that I encounter has like, I don't know, like a happier timbre or like a happier kind of like, or a more upbeat swing a lot. Like,
Right.
it's based in like, it's based in rock and roll. Like, I guess.
I think that was
So
true of a
metal,
lot of
so
indie
it's
rock when we
metal,
were
right?
in school too.
Yeah. And I think since my exposure has been limited, I'm not able to like, and this might be even an interesting perspective on Rilo Kiley. I'm not able to situate them among peers or bands that have followed that have taken inspiration or bands that Rilo Kiley took inspiration from. Like, I'm not able to contextualize them, but I think having that perspective is actually an interesting one because you're fresh.
Yeah.
Like, you kind of hear the music without the noise around it.
No, I agree.
And I clearly like what I hear. Like, there is an authenticity to it that I think a lot of indie might try to achieve, because that's a key part, I think, of indie rock, is like that level of sincerity.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to like nail that without trying or looking like you're trying, or
Totally.
exactly being a little stilted sometimes. Never got that feel from Rilo Kiley.
Especially
Yeah.
being that young. I mean, I
Yeah.
kind of wish I could see them play as like the teens that they
Mhm.
were, and see like, oh, like this is like clearly in a work in progress.
Yeah.
Like, but the songs didn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Interesting that like age is a big thing too, like being young and like having a band that, like, there's some bands in my circles where like some of the musicians are like under 21. They're like still in their teens. And I don't know, doesn't necessarily make a difference, but like it can, like maybe some energy.
If you're touring, it makes a difference. I'll
Okay,
tell you
yeah,
that.
physically, absolutely. And then that translates to the quality of the live shows, obviously, and everything. But
Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, it really does matter for your ability to like live in a van and
I agree.
set up and play shows.
I'm thinking like artistically, like how much fervor and output you have, and I'm thinking about my life, and I was definitely more fervorous and had more output when I was in my teens.
I think you're less afraid to talk about
Yeah.
your feelings too.
I think
like,
so.
I think the angsty, there's some strength in angst.
There is youth and music is a huge topic. I love that.
Yeah.
Like what it's like to be young and a little bit without regard, and how that translates well to music.
Totally.
You can watch a band grow along these paths too, which I'm sure you watched Rilo Kiley grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, like you said, the youth and music thing is real, because just to be that unafraid to like
Mhm.
feel that way about something and that strongly is impressive.
Awesome. Well, that's like, I think that's a great like both description of Rilo Kiley, like kind of how they're situated in indie rock, like what the sound and kind of mood of it is, but also your experience like getting into it and being part of it. Like that's cool.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to share that with people. And like I said, get in the comments.
Definitely, like wherever you are in the music sphere, like put on some Rilo Kiley, just check it out. Like, check
Absolutely.
out good indie rock, and I think you'll be pleased. I think it'll be amazing. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about a different space of music. So we're shifting from indie rock to funeral doom, which I think is a cool little transition.
Yeah. Good contrast.
If you think about it, you could find some carryover, but it's going to be a lot of contrast. But what I want to describe and talk about is the band Bell Witch. They are a funeral doom band, obviously. Like I mentioned, they've been around since early 2010s, so about a decade now. Still active. They're probably their best commercial release so far. It's an album called Mirror Reaper. It's kind of noted for being over an hour long in one single performance or one track. So it's almost like, it's kind of like a live album where you kind of listen to the whole set. It's an entire set, but it's thematically and kind of musically divided into three distinct segments. You can kind of,
I was going to ask, is
Yeah.
it divided for A, B, or it's three segments with pauses, or how's it the one track
I think
broken up?
they did it so it makes sense with records.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's not a cut and then enter back. It's like it slows down and it gets very slow and quiet and then builds back up into the second. I call them movements.
I was going to say
Right.
it sounds very intentionally like
it is.
movements or acts.
Yep. I think precisely that's the way to describe it. Yeah. So the album as a whole, and this describes sort of how funeral doom works. If you're not familiar with what it is, it's a very slow, low BPM, sort of like if you were to artistically recreate like a real funeral dirge, like
Yeah.
that slow, methodical, like like it's very morose, very sad, sort of like I call it like thumping, like 1, 2, even slower than that. But
Would you call their songs dirges?
yes, like
Okay.
yeah, if your casket was being carried from the funeral home to the ground where you were about to be buried, it would be extremely appropriate music for that.
Yeah.
And this is the real like twist to their story. The real sort of interesting take on their story is that one of their founding members, they've been a duo until recently. Now they're collaborating with other artists, but it's always been bass and drums, which is an interesting dynamic for a metal band not having a guitarist, and for the drummer to do vocals. But what happened was their original founding member, the drummer, ended up passing away due to illness, I believe. They integrated some of the late drummers' earlier material into this album in a very like ghostly way, right?
I could see that being inappropriate in a lot of circumstances,
But for Funeral
but
Doom,
it seems pretty appropriate for this one.
exactly. And what's not stilted about this is that they were always a Funeral Doom man, and he wasn't planning on dying, right? Like this situation came up, it emerged, and they in part handled the trauma by creating artwork with it, right? I don't want to presume that was part of their trauma handling process too hard, but I'm pretty sure that it was intentional, them including vocals from a prior take of the past drummers in this album. Like I assume that was done as a matter of honor, but it also as a matter of like, coming to terms, right?
Well, I think it's important. The way you said it is really good. It's important to distinguish trauma making people feel creatively inclined rather than this being a way for them to process trauma or the trauma informing some decisions.
Right.
Because I hate the like starving artist trope.
There's two prongs. Yeah, like you said, there's two prongs there. Like there's trauma that can just cause you to like distract yourself with artistic pursuits, but there's also artistic pursuits that help you find peace with trauma or find something or find progress or whatever it is, but handle the feeling.
Right. And the point being that trauma is not necessary for art.
Exactly.
But this was a good vehicle for it.
Yeah. But this, and I think for Mirror Reaper specifically, the execution of it being that Bell Witch is sort of known for the minimalist take, like I mentioned, just 6-string bass, a lot of tapping with drums, and the drummer is doing vocals. I think that minimalist sort of take is extremely sad and beautiful. Like it's one of the rare instances where I think like a almost a format or a dedication to a methodology or style is itself artistic, right? Like to execute something of such monumental beauty and sadness with so little is almost like a call sign to sadness itself. Like look how little we have to work with.
It's a task for sure. I'm trying to think like it's a challenge. I mean, that sounds like a challenge to yourself, almost to make that kind of music.
It is to like paint only with a few colors. Not to say that like Bell Witch sounds at all like very compressed or flat. Like they sound extremely rich, almost like they had 15 musicians playing this music, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's so minimal, like it just has. That's what's the magic about this album. That's why I want people to listen to it and see like what they think about it.
I also find in that setup of a drummer and bassist only, those bands tend to be more dynamic because they try to make up for it in other ways, more creative ways.
That makes sense.
Especially a 6-string bass. Yeah. That's like a decision.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And I like how Bell Witch like they convey the theme and the mood and how they want you to feel, or not necessarily like they're prescribing how they want you to feel, but like
the intended feeling.
Exactly. They're whatever the catalyst is for the feelings that you have when you listen to it. I feel like they lay it so bare and like so almost painfully bare. Like, and this brings me to an experience I had with them at Thalia Hall down the street here from where we're recording. A great music venue in Chicago, known for excellent sound and a great experience overall. So like the atmosphere is set. The the theme was set, and Bellwitch was playing with mono. He's fantastic, by the way.
Oh yeah, love
Dude.
mono.
What a blast!
Yeah.
Full orchestra and everything.
Oh wow.
So like a very like that was a very surging upward experience, and then Bellwitch sort of takes you and brings you down very slowly.
Mm-hmm.
So at that moment, at that cusp, having seen mono and been real excited about it and everything, and getting into Bellwitch, I was like at the perfect. When you've had a few drinks and you get really good at ping pong, but like you can only do it when you balance on that. I just had a few drinks.
Right.
I was on that press. I was.
It's
on
like
that,
you're in the groove.
Yeah, and I was doing show photography for the show as well. So like Photo Pit, I kind of had that closer experience to it. But to see Bellwitch from the Photo Pit, like, and get to spend that much, I guess, intimate sort of out of the headspace of being in a crowd sort of situation with that band is perfect for what it is, because it's extremely meditative music.
I feel like I empathize with that feeling more too, because I've seen Ohm so many times.
We're
feels
up the
very
same
similar.
alley. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Ohm is more of like the drone aspect, and I think Funeral Doom incorporates elements of drone, but not purposefully. It almost has to drone by nature of it being slow.
Yeah. And there are some songs that are not too.
That's true.
But yeah, it's very like, I know that feeling where you're like, I don't want to say like possession or something, but you're just kind of like possessed by the moment.
You're zonked into it, I call it. Yeah, you're like, you're a little zonked out because like there's something very atmospheric or very like, what I call it, like enrapturing about the music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is like that. This is the language that Bellwitch speaks, is like using as little as possible to distract you from the real message, and that's like ultimately death and sadness.
Yeah, and I'm honestly, it kind of makes me think more historically, like, and Ohm falls into this vein too, where it feels like really, really old music. I sent you that video of that Celtic horn the other day.
Yeah,
like stuff like that, where it's like
interesting point. I like this.
Music was only about ritual, death, or very important events.
Yeah, You're right. You're spot on that. Is that like there is a ritualistic element to any Bellwitch performance or album, especially Mirror Reaper.
Mm-hmm.
It feels almost like, and like I mentioned, incorporating the founding drummer's vocals into the album. I think that was like that really makes it feel like a ceremony, like a ritual. It has that, and I think most Funeral Doom has this. That's important because like that puts you into an experience listening to this music that might be different than how other music puts you into whatever experience it does, right? Some people are willing to go down that path. Some people want to taste it, and some people aren't interested, and that's like cool. I think a big thing will be the vocals that are the hardest part for people to sort of come to terms with, I guess. If you're not used to like growling or low guttural vocals, I wouldn't describe Bellwitch as shouty in any measure, screaming I mean, they are growls, but it's not like, I call it the ooga booga, right? It's no, it's not like knuckle dragging caveman shit that some death metal is, right?
Right.
No, this is very like.
It's more like the Babadook.
If you know anything about like Tibetan throat singing and your ears are tuned to like hear and appreciate the sound it makes, like it becomes beautiful. And that's the only way I can describe it, is that you learn to appreciate it like you learn to appreciate beer, which is bitter.
Yeah.
Or coffee.
I think you're saying it's an acquired taste.
It is.
But
without saying like you have to be fancy to like it.
No. But it's like for a certain group of people, it's very important. For a lot of people, they can probably appreciate it from the outside. I think so.
And even if you're turned off by the vocals, I think like mentally you can sort of background them because the music itself is so compelling.
Mm-hmm.
The bass, especially the bass work. I mean, I can't discount the drums, but the way that he plays bass, tapping, and I think he's doing multiple chords, tapping at the same time.
I was going to ask, do you know what kind of bass he uses?
I don't. I have photos of him that I took, but also like there's online.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he plays. I do think and I've seen his rack. I'm sure I think he has a very, very nice setup.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I know there was a lot of, like from the gear world, like Manus was a big brand for stuff like that. In that vein where it needs to be a very versatile bass.
I think so. It does, because he's playing in a very, very technical sort of way.
Mm-hmm.
But what's funny is that in the final product in the music, you don't really conceive of him playing these riffs in a very like, if you play guitar and watch him, you would know that that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound hard.
It sounds like the music kind of transcends that it's drums and bass. You're kind of not thinking about that.
Absolutely, it does. And like people who are metalheads and people who know about Bell Witch but haven't seen them live, some of them don't even know that it's just two performers, two artists.
Right.
Now, they have done a collaboration on a later release to include additional members from another band, and that's sort of a blend of the two bands. I'm okay with that album. Like, it's pretty good. I always go back to Mirror Reaper as my favorite Bell Witch release. The prior release, Four Phantoms, is a fantastic album as well. That one's 4 tracks. It's not. It does thematically. Those 4 tracks blend very cohesively, so you get like a full listening experience. But it's not the one single long.
So, what do you recommend if someone wants to get into it? Which one should they start
Dive
with?
right into Mirror Reaper. I mean, like, just sit through it as long as you need to decide that it's for you or not.
Mm-hmm.
It starts off. I recommend Mirror Reaper because it starts off it starts on a very gradual wavelength, getting going. It starts very soft and slow. The vocals, I won't spoil anything, but the vocals and the drums do hit at a hard point, kind of like a moment where they come to their full sound. I think that's a powerful moment, but it could be like off-putting.
Yeah.
If you're not used to like all of a sudden there being growling and very slow, methodical bass.
And what was the band they collaborated with on the other record?
Let me double check that. It was Aerial Ruin. Yeah.
Aerial Ruin. Okay.
Yeah, they collaborated with Aerial Ruin on their second to last release, and then they have a release this year that I don't think is a collaboration, but I'm unsure. It might be just them. But Mirror Reaper, let me just confirm the date. Yeah, it was 2017. Four Phantoms, their prior release was 15, and then Longing, their debut, 2012.
So did you yourself start with Mirror Reaper, or did you kind of come in from the
I started
beginning?
with Four Phantoms, and I enjoyed that album. It didn't showcase the type of songwriting that Mirror Reaper showcased. They switched that up. That was an evolution. Four Phantoms stuck with me. That's a powerful album. It is one of the unstoppable Funeral Doom albums, I think.
It is funny too. I feel like bands tend to follow a trend of like being really intentional about their sophomore album hitting hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's probably less of a thing for bands like this, but
I think they took a risk with this one. I think this was a big risk.
This does sound like more of a sophomore vibe.
Yeah.
Even though their second one hit really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. This being their third, like it was I think at that point it was like we have proof of this sound being very impactful. And then I think for this album they said how can we make it as like grandiose and as big as possible? How can we expand these ideas we came up with on Four Phantoms and grow them into like a big narrative, right? And so they end up with this like Homeric sort of hour and 20-minute long experience.
And so for all 3 albums, it's all drums and bass. Did they use any orchestral stuff or any like synth or computer effects, or is it all drums and bass?
I believe there is. Let me double check that. There is a part where they use, like I mentioned, the former drummer's vocals, which becomes in as sort of like a floating sort of atmospheric layer. Like they're kind of drawn out.
Because I do like it when bands use like kind of something unexpected to fill out the
and the drummer does use a synth or a keyboard.
Okay, cool.
Of sorts, to add to the mix.
Yeah.
So okay. So to say it's purely drum, bass, and vocals is slightly inaccurate. Yeah.
I mean, as performed, it probably is.
When you listen to it, you hear it. Yeah. But then they do when they do execute or end up using the synth or the keyboard, it's always like it might not always be just one note, but it seems like a solid like bass line.
Is it kind of like washing noise?
It becomes almost the noise floor, right?
Yeah.
The background. So it's nothing like.
I mean, I do like it when synths are utilized for stuff like that.
Yeah,
because
it's atmosphere.
Then you can add atmosphere while not having to employ a whole other kind of facet of the band.
Exactly.
A lot of bands use like those old omnichords and stuff like that for that. but it's always interesting to see how it's executed.
Yeah. And all of this is in the name of like, I mean, there's no two ways about it. There's no fucking around. Like Bell Witch is a band about like death and sadness. Like it is a coming to that. It is, you listen to it and it is a funeral dirge. It is nothing other than that. It's funeral doom, right? Like it's very beautiful and somber. And I think combining rapture and combining beauty with sadness and despair to create like an artistic nexus where those two things mix is like mixing oil and water, right? But they do it with a level of artistry and a level of simplicity that I think is extremely noteworthy.
Do you think that's what drew you to them
always
originally? Like just that kind of powerful
just that
synthesis of those two things?
Just the ability to say so much with so little was impactful on itself. And then just the real content about death and sadness, like it's there and it's real in life and you can reflect to it with this real music. I think both of those things drew me to it immediately. Definitely my favorite funeral doom band, and that definitely is my favorite funeral doom album.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you think I feel like I just said do you think, but do you think there are other like bands that they either influenced or were influenced by? Like what's kind of
it's hard to say because like funeral doom is just not a populated space. It's to be a funeral doom band means you are nothing but funeral doom, and I think because you have to play so slow generally, and you have to like adopt a style that does not translate to most other metal types. Like you can be thrash and death and black metal at the same time. Like you can write an album cohesively that is those three things, but to be funeral doom, it's hard to be other things. Now there's death doom and other forms of doom, but funeral doom, that inclusion of the word funeral basically locks it into a specific sound or a style. So it's pretty gated, I think, this one.
I do like how your journalism background is showing through here a little bit, where you're like, these are the terms, here are the bands. Because I kind of come from the opposite perspective where like I don't usually think of those terms first when I think of the bands. Yeah. Because they're all made up terms by journalists.
They are. They absolutely are. It fits in a bigger subgenre of just doom, which can include stoner doom and other sorts of music that you would listen to side by side and know that they're completely different. But hey, this just comes from listening to a lot of metal. This might sound similar to a lot of heavy stuff to some people. So just depends on where you come from. So I'm all for that contextuality, right, of categories. But I'll be guilty as much as to still use them to describe things.
I mean, it's not a thing to feel good or bad about. I'm just
sort of the way it works. You got to understand how they sort of come to.
Yeah, we have to use our words to talk about it. So it's important to have words to talk about them with.
And as you guys can tell, I have many about Bell Witch and Mere Reaper. I think, like, just to sum up, like, kind of how I relate to this album is like, you know, a lot of heavy music and a lot of like intense sort of music that goes downward. I mean, like emotionally, like sadness, anger,
touches on hard to touch emotions.
Exactly. I think like there's a couple ways to do it, and metal sometimes does it right and wrong, just like other genres. But this is it done right. Like this I think goes beyond heavy metal. This album, like that's my final point on it, is that
transcends the kind of genre.
I think you can not care or know anything about heavy metal or want no interest, but I think you should. I think anyone who at least wants to have an opinion on heavy metal has to listen to an album like this or this one to know what they're talking about. Okay. To at least have the chance to understand that like this, a lot of the stereotypes are clearly wrong, but like even deeper than that metal can do something that maybe some other genres have trouble doing. Or like it can get you to emotional spaces that other genres don't have the material for or the space for.
Right.
And this depends on the person, of course. But
yeah, I mean, there's power in that to be able to touch untouchable emotions.
This is all about trying new things. This is all about putting effort into trying new things. It's like being okay with going somewhere you haven't been before. So.
Yeah, and that's what Sound Sagas is all about.
That's what it's all about. Is listening to funeral doom is about the end times. But no, I overall what the impression that album leaves me with is one of beauty, like one of one of incredible beauty. It's like an honor to someone's life as well. Remember, there's like a positive element to this.
Totally.
That even though the drummer passed away, like that drummer, that artist's contribution lives beyond what he saw, right?
Yeah, and in a way that he would appreciate.
In a way, and this not an unpopular album in the metal spaces either. This album hit hard. Like people, it made waves, and for good reason, because it's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a big drop in the bucket. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. I'm sure a lot of people will check that out. We'll also throw a couple links in the comment or in the description about this.
Absolutely. Anything you need to know or listen to, we'll link up for you.
Yeah, and this has been our first deep dive, but look forward to more of these. Again, get in the comments, tell us stuff you want to hear more about or want to hear about at all. We're happy to consider stuff and do some polls and figure some things out. In the meantime, smash that like and subscribe. We're Sound Sagas TV on YouTube. If you're watching the video version of this, great. If you're not, there's a video version of this. We're Sound Sagas on Facebook and Instagram, and soundsagas.com.
Come visit, come see us, let us know how you think. We'll be around. See you in the next one, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Hey man, what you doing by myself? If I tell you what, boy, I say, hey man, what you doing by myself? A snatch. I say, hey man, what you doing by myself? A big fatty titty white boy. I say, hey man, what you doing by myself? A snack.